welcome back to As You Pass By. My name is James West, and today we're going to be looking into the very famous New Yorker by the name of P.T. Barnum, Phineas Taylor Barnum, who was born in 1810, died in 1891 at the age of 80 years old. And we're not going to really look very closely in on his life because there have been many books written about him, including books that he himself wrote. There have been several movies made about him. He's probably the most, well, aside from George Washington, he's probably the most famous New Yorker I've talked about so far. But he had a museum. It was called a museum. It was like a combination of museum, circus, performance space, you name it, down on Lower Broadway and the corner of Ann Street. And we're going to be taking a look there shortly. There's nothing really left to see. There have been several buildings built since the P.T. Barnum's American Museum existed on that spot. But it had thousands of exhibits inside. There were all kinds of curiosities. The world's oldest clam. He had shows that he constantly put on. He was exhibiting. Some of his more famous ones were General Tom Thumb, who he presented as the world's smallest human being. In fact, he was a 4-year-old child who was dressed up to look like he had been a general. So he was quite a character, P.T. Barnum. He was constantly sort of inventing things, including himself, to sort of entice the public. And he's widely attributed to have said a number of things, one of which was never give a sucker an even break. There's no proof that he ever said that. The other one that's sort of famously attributed to Mr. Barnum is no one ever lost a dollar underestimating the good taste of the American public. That's also been attributed to some other people, including Mark Twain and H.L. Mencken. No one really knows for sure who said it or in what manner they said it. But anyway, it's widely thought, or it's often widely attributed to P.T. Barnum. So aside from the museum that he had down on Lower Broadway, which, by the way, was the conjunction of Park Row, Broadway, and Ann Street on one side, and then Vesey Street on the other side of Broadway. It was quite a large place. But he also had another theater up on 14th Street and what is today 4th Avenue. I have not been able to find a single photograph or drawing or appearance in any map or anything that relates to the 14th Street showroom or circus. It's probably because he was only there for about, I don't know, a year or so until he moved up to the what is today known as the around Madison Square. So P.T. Barnum only owned the space on 14th Street for a short period of time before it burned down, and a number of his locations were plagued by fire. The location on Lower Broadway was completely gutted by fire, as you can see in the photographs. And when it burned, a number of the animals that were inside, including a Bengal tiger, escaped and were roaming around the streets of New York and causing quite a lot of havoc. And the other place where he was located was on 25th Street, where the Hippodrome was located, and was also then later to become the first Madison Square Garden, and a very elaborate sort of Gothic structure. P.T. Barnum lived in Connecticut. He was born in Bethel, Connecticut in 1810. He lived in Bridgeport for most of his life, and he had a couple of very spectacular houses there, one of which was named Iranistan, another sort of creation of his, and it was designed to look like a Persian castle or something. It was sort of a fantasy land, and quite huge, and it burned down as well. So he and much of New York was sort of plagued by massive fires, and in those days there wasn't really any organized fire department, so they had to rely on some local companies, and not all of which would either arrive at the fire on time or be able to do much once they got there. Anyway, so our next stop is going to be on Broadway and Ann Street, and we can see what remains of the P.T. Barnum American Museum. We're here at the corner of Church Street and Fulton Street, very iconic part of New York, where you can see the World Trade Center in the background, the brand new Pearlstein Theater, which is the kind of smallish white cube. It's not really that small, but compared to its neighbors, it looks small. Right behind us, as soon as we turn the corner, we're in a much older New York. And that's St. Paul's Chapel right there. We visited there before. Now, you can't see it, it's not there anymore, but right in the corner of Fulton and Church was a small engine company. And we'll show you a drawing because it existed there before photography had been invented. So it was in the 1700s into the maybe 1810. But there was a small engine house. We'll sort of tie it together in a few minutes. So we're here on the corner of Broadway, Ann Street, which goes down that way, and Vesey Street, which is to my right. We're looking at a building here, which is now known as 222 Broadway. And this was the site of the Barnum American Museum, which was a kind of a combination between museum, circus, carnival. It was a lot of things. And it stood here from 1841 until 1865, when it was burned down. It burned to the ground, basically, and closed in 1865, and then relocated further uptown. Over here is, you can see Park Row, the beginning of Park Row, and City Hall over to my left, a little farther in the background. So there's 5 streets really that converge here. So the Barnum Museum caught fire in July of 1865, and there were it was a catastrophic fire. The entire building was engulfed, as you can see from the drawings. There were some photographs taken of the aftermath, with the building flooded with water. After the museum was torn down in 1865, The site where it was located was then the site of the future St. Paul building, which was one of the tallest structures in Manhattan at the time. It was built in about 1880, and it was demolished in the 1950s to make way for what is currently here now, which is 222 Broadway. And it was the home of the Western Electric Company, which was an arm of AT&T, which was right across the street. This sort of stone building with the gold bands around the windows, that was where the AT&T headquarters were located. And AT&T owned Western Electric. This building, while it's kind of considered modern, was built in 1962. So that's over 60 years ago that it's been standing here. So we are still on Ann Street. You can see some of the buildings are quite a bit older, date back probably into the 19th century. And we're here right across the street from number 60 Ann Street. And this was the site of, and you can see it in the drawing, this is the site of the engine company number 4 that was located in the sort of in the corner of the churchyard of the North Dutch Church. And you can also see there are no photographs of the church. It was torn down before photography was invented, but there are some drawings. Anyway, and you can also see the angle of the view from where we are now. That's towards William Street, and we're gonna go around the corner. So we're on Fulton Street right now, near the corner of William Street. And right over here is the other end of what used to be the North Dutch Church cemetery. So the church probably was located on the entire lot where this building is currently, and that's 111 Fulton Street. And over in the corner was a very small engine company, number 5. And this was also just about a block away from where the Barnum Museum would have been in 1865. So it was probably, and I'm speculating, but one of the engine companies that responded to the fire that had broken out at the museum, at the circus. Thanks for watching, everyone. This has been another episode of As You Pass By. And before we end, I just wanted to add a couple of words about the fire companies that existed in the early 1800s. These were largely horse-pulled and hand-operated pumping facilities that would, be pulled to the scene of the fire. And, there were, as you can see in the drawings, they were very small. They were labor intensive, and they were sort of spread all over the place. There were dozens of them in downtown Manhattan in the early days. And what they did was they had scouts and people that were wandering around the neighborhood at night with large horns to signal if a fire had been spotted, and to alert the members of the company to come immediately. So, and this was before there was an organized fire department. The city of New York hadn't really coagulated into that degree. There wasn't really a police department either in the early 1800s. The fire departments the firehouses were mostly, just sort of a loose confederation of people from the neighborhood, men from the neighborhood. And, there was some friendly and somewhat not so friendly competition, but, it wasn't until much, much later, around when the city of New York consolidated in the late 1800s, that the fire department sort of coalesced around a city agency. So anyway, these were the pioneers of firefighting. They had a small pump, a small hose, and a lot of elbow grease that were required to put out these fires. Most of which were incredibly devastating and often resulted in the entire leveling of a building. So anyway, thanks again for watching, and please remember to like and subscribe. You can subscribe just down below. And also, we really appreciate your comments here. So if you want to add something or make a suggestion, or just check in and say hi, we really appreciate it. I try and answer all of the comments. There's only one so far I've had to delete. But anyway, keep them coming, and hope you enjoyed this episode.